In this episode of The Bear Roars, Dan continues his conversation with Molly Bloom, best-selling author, poker entrepreneur, and the woman behind the Oscar-nominated film Molly's Game. Last time we heard how Molly rose from the ski slopes of Colorado to running Hollywood's most exclusive high-stakes poker game. Part 2 dives into the turning points that defined her fall and, more importantly, her comeback. Molly takes us inside her New York games at the height of the financial crisis, where billion-dollar bets collided with organized crime, the FBI, and the Russian mob. She shares the darkest moments, violence, asset seizures, and federal indictments, and the unlikely path she took to reclaim her life, guided by meditation, integrity, and an unshakable will to start over. Let's poke the bear to kick off the conversation.
So Molly Bloom Part 2.
I couldn't stay away.
Yes, we ran out of time. We both had a hard deadline, and we were a full hour and a half in, and we covered a lot of great ground, which I want to do a little bit of a recap when we get going. But we were just getting the part where things started to really get interesting, and we're going to go there. But if you could indulge me first, and I'm going to tell you my favorite personal poker story.
Okay.
Which was a lot of fun. So I think I probably mentioned in the last podcast that I used to throw big poker games myself. They'd be tournaments, Texas Hold'em tournaments, start with 70 or so people, would all the way down to the final person at the end. And there was one time having the tournament, and it was fairly early in the night. So there were 12 people around the table, and I was the dealer. And the way this hand unfolded was just epic.
Okay.
So I get my two cards, and it's a king of spades and a nine of spades. So suited, or 10 of spades, king and 10. So suited, king 10. And I'm the last person to bet because I'm the dealer, and everyone's staying in. So the big blind gets matched, someone doubles it, in and in. So all 12 people are in after the first hand, which starts to make it interesting because the pot's building up.
Pre-flop or?
This is pre-flop. Okay. Everyone's in.
Okay.
Now the flop comes. And the flop has a lot of paint and a lot of spades. So my king 10 spade probably had a queen and a queen and a 9 pop up as well. So now I have 4 to a straight flush, which is good, but unless other people stay in, you don't know what's going to happen. Certainly I'll stay in and see what happens. The other 2 cards, in addition to the queen and the spades and the 9 of spades, was another queen and another king. So now there's paint all over the board. I guess there are only 3 cards at that point, so maybe the queen. So 2 queens, a 9 of spades. So now anyone else who's sitting on a couple spades is thinking spades. People are thinking about straight. They're like, okay, I can see a path toward a straight. Those who have, paint, they're seeing more paint on the board. Everyone stays in again. Pot's getting bigger. People are doubling the bet. I'm trying to stay calm. I still need another card anyways. Well, then the turn comes, the 4th card, and I get my straight flush, king high. So I know at that point, no one's going to beat me, right? Mm-hmm. But there's still a whole nother card to go, and the betting's just starting. Well, everyone's staying in, and people are starting to double and then double again. So I'm like, holy shit, everyone's got a straight, everyone's got a flush, or everyone's got a full house. So everyone's in, they're doubling, and there comes to me, and I'm like, just, okay, you got the nut hand. There's a whole nother round of betting to go. Keep it easy. So I probably just matched and kept it going because the pot's getting quite big, and I don't want anyone to be scared away. Well, the last card comes, it's the river, and it hits everyone's hands. Now, I don't need it because I already have, the nut hand, but whatever everyone else was looking for, it seemed like that last card was it. So maybe it was like another king at that point. Maybe it was an ace, but whatever people were hoping for, they're flush, they're straight, they're full boat. It seemed like everyone got it. So now everyone's betting. All in, followed by another all in, followed by another all in. And it's getting to me, I'm like, I've got the nut hand unless I'm missing something here. Everyone's all in. Maybe 2 people dropped. And so now the hand comes to me, and I'm like, going to play this for all that it's worth. So I'm pretending like I'm not sure if I'm going to stay in, if I'm not going to stay in. I'm like, you better bring a bottle of tequila. Everyone's taking shots. I drag it out for about 20 minutes.
20 minutes?
Probably, because we were having so much fun. It was a lot of friends, getting loud. Maybe it was 10 minutes, but it was a long time before I, said all in, even though I knew I had the winning hand. Go all in. Whoever was still left who wasn't all in, they either stayed in or not. You know, even though it was early in the night, half the people are going to get wiped out because at least half are all in. Show my hand. Not only did I win that hand, breaking all the chips, but 3 hours later, I won the 72-person tournament. And it was the most fun I had. So that's what Tex Hold'em is all about.
Those are the nights that keep you coming back.
Exactly. Fortunately, I don't have like a betting urge other than when I'm with friends. So if I did, I'd probably not be living in this house anymore.
That's for sure. Seen it happen.
Okay, so let's do a recap of the last episode. And we covered a lot of ground. We covered that you grew up as the middle child with an older brother and a younger brother. Oh, you were the oldest. Mm-hmm. Your dad was definitely overachiever, and he wanted you guys all to be overachievers as well. You were a ski racer, but got injured, so your ski racing career, ended early. Your brother went on to be an Olympic racer, made NFL. Your other brother was extremely smart, if I remember, at math. Went to top university, was going to be a doctor, and you're here with kind of an injury and trying to figure out what am I going to do to have your own fulfilling journey forward. You end up moving to LA. You get in with the LA crowd. Somehow you end up being at this poker game as a person to help out. You emerge from there to be like the head of the poker game. And we'll keep going, but let me pause there. So of my recap so far, what highlights would you remind the group
I think
with?
you covered it. I think that that was perfect.
And the game that you had in Hollywood was A-list stars, many of which the names have come up, people like Ben Affleck and who were a couple other ones whose names have been shared.
Yeah, so just the names that I share are people that have talked about playing the games themselves. It's not illegal to play in a poker game, and there's a lot of people that are well known that fully embrace the fact that they love poker, and so
Sure.
Some examples of those people that also were regulars in the game were Affleck and Tobey Maguire.
Yep.
A-Rod played for a while, and then there were others that haven't talked about, like the politicians kept it quiet, a lot of the people who ran publicly traded companies. And so I just kind of feel like that's their story to tell.
Yep.
But it was certainly a who's who of, multiple different industries and walks of life. And
you were right in the center of it all. You were the one coordinating it, bringing people in, setting the vibe, running the nights, and you were doing that for how long would you say? How long were you in LA doing that?
For about 4 years.
About 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
and then someone didn't like the prominence that you were getting. They kind of took over the game without being transparent with you, and all of a sudden, you went from kind of running the game to being kind of left out of it. If I remember the story right.
I was given a choice. One of the celebrities in the game developed what I would deem pretty safely as a pathological obsession with the game.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much as, it wasn't an out-of-control gambling addiction. It was a pathological desire to win every hand, every game. And this person wanted to talk about the hands, after they were played, and download on the game for hours and hours and hours. And he, in the beginning, was a huge asset because he would bring new players, and he was a draw. But then he started to kind of cross that line of, I really like to play this game and I'm going to work on my skills, to how can I have even more of an edge? Mm-hmm. And my job as the game runner, and the reason why I never sat down to play, is because it allowed me to have an unbiased perspective and to really make decisions for the whole,
of the game,
right? As opposed to pandering to,
And what would he want to happen that would give him an edge?
bringing a pro owning a piece of somebody at the table, which means
There's really two hands playing against the rest.
That's right.
With the rest not knowing it.
Right.
So they're sort of helping each other out.
Yeah.
Subtly.
Mm-hmm. And, over time, I became more and more my own person and became more of a...
Because you were young. I mean,
I was young.
What age roughly would that have been?
26, 25.
So you're still finding your way
Yeah.
in the world and around all these high profile people and holding your own, but still learning at the same time.
Right. And standing up to people that were powerful. Some of the other game runners in town would try to intimidate me. Some of the pros would try to, threaten me or incentivize me to put them in the game. And this particular person was very smart, very strategic, and knew very well how to use his social currency. And long story short, he ended up offering me a deal that I could work for him and he would dictate my salary. By this time, I was running the books. And the games themselves, the way that I made money that allowed it to be legal for me was the winners tipped. But you have to look kind of closer at what that meant. So there were 9 seats at the table. Everybody wanted a seat. I was in charge of who got a seat. I was in charge of how much credit someone got. And I, really essentially was giving someone a seat and giving them a loan.
Yeah. Because if you raked, the table, that maybe is crossing the line.
Right.
Right.
That's right.
But if you were
have to have a game
making
license.
money in other ways.
Yeah, I had an event planning company and I was getting tipped.
Yeah.
And this person said, "You're making too much money and you can come work for me and I'll give you a salary." And, it went without saying, "You'll be the figurehead and I'll be the real CEO or whatever." And I went home and I knew I was in a bad spot. I knew that he had more power than I did. And I knew that he played dirty. But I didn't want to be under his thumb. The part of the magnificence of this game for me was that I had agency. I could make my own decisions. I could do it the way that I thought was best and most fair. And, that I was managing personalities and people and it was my thing. And so I didn't want to lose that. And I certainly didn't want to lose it in the way that he was offering. So I turned it down. And then kind of gleefully, he called me a couple weeks later and said, "Don't bother calling anyone to come to your game. I've stolen all your players."
Wow.
Yeah.
And so that caused you to then move to New York.
Yeah. I mean, my parents had a great point. They said, "This is a perfect time for you to go back to school. You've made a lot of money. You've gotten an incredible education." And I said, "You're right. You're not wrong." And yes, the plan is still not to do this forever. I don't know. Dan, I needed to prove to myself that I didn't need to live in a world where somebody who just had power for, flying in front of a green screen or whatever. And I don't mean to minimize the profession. Like, there's a lot of talent involved, but just because somebody has more power than you, they can dictate the terms of your life. And I just couldn't kind of live with that. And I didn't want to go down like that. So I decided that I was going to build the biggest poker game in the world. I was going to do it on Wall Street after doing some market analysis. It seemed like the best place to do it. But my timing was terrible. It was 2008. And we had just had that
the Great
incredible
Recession, mortgage crisis.
And it all centered around Wall Street. And but I think I was just so focused on proving that thing to myself. And so I went to New York and I did a bunch of, I met with a bunch of people. I met with a bunch of players and tried to find out where the problems were with the current system. I found my way to...
How do you even get started doing that, though? I mean, you show up in New York. Did you have some connections from the LA game that you're able to...
Yeah, I mean, it's... When you're talking about poker at those stakes, it's a relatively small universe.
Yeah.
And so, I just kind of worked my network, and I found these guys who had been playing this huge game for 20 years, but they never really settled. It was just like, it was like, I'm buying a yacht. Can I have that money you owe me? So there are a lot of challenges to it. And then there were these game runners who had been running the games for 20 years, and they were scary, and they didn't want me to come to town, but I just kind of navigated all those things. And
scary because they were mob related. Is that right?
I wouldn't say they're mob related, but I think that they had relationships. And the truth is I just didn't know. I was out of my depth for sure. But I ended up kind of being successful and starting that game. And it was a $250,000 buy-in, and that game got so big over the years that somebody lost $100 million in one night. And then, and then after $100 million, after I was gone, it became this billionaires game that people were losing $1 billion a year, and even people who you thought were untouchably rich were getting hurt. So, anyway, so New York was a huge victory. It made a lot of noise, in terms of.
And where would the games be held in
the Plaza or the Four
so
Seasons? Yeah,
you get one of those big, suite rooms with a big table.
Yeah,
nice. And this is getting to the point where we ran out of time in the last session. We were getting to the point where you had the game in New York. It picked up success. Things were going well. How long were you running a game there?
New York was a rocket shot. I got successful really fast, and became probably the biggest game runner in New York City within a couple of months, because I didn't just build that game. I built the Farm League and the variation, the derivatives of Texas Hold'em, and it got the attention of some people that you don't want to get the attention of, and
this is kind of where we left off last time, so it's going to get interesting.
Yeah, New York gets interesting. The first thing that happened was I had recruited some whales, as we call it in my industry or my former industry, and they wanted to play poker all the time, lots of money. They brought cash. I had them vetted. I had pretty serious private or
security.
Not security. Who vets politicians? I'm so sleep deprived right now.
Yeah, private detectives.
PIs. Yeah.
Detectives.
Yeah, investigators.
Private eyes.
Woo. And their stories checked out, but if I'm being really honest with you, I knew in my gut that something was off. I didn't know how incredibly off it was, but it turns out they were at the time running the biggest insurance fraud scheme in New York City history.
Oof.
And they had alleged ties to the Russian mob.
Okay.
So it was a pretty freaking big mistake to make.
How did that start to reveal itself to you?
That revealed itself to me later when the CI, the confidential informant, they put in the game.
So who put the confidential informant?
The feds.
The feds did?
Yeah, because they were listening to these guys' phones, and they started hearing about this $100 million poker game where, you could go and win.
How did you bankroll a $100 million
Well,
poker
I
game?
mean, on nights like that, like there was a cap of what I would guarantee. So they would have to settle, the first 10, and then the rest is like that's your side deal. Yeah. I didn't make that much money. I mean, I make good money, but and so it just got gnarly, and then I had a run-in with Italian organized crime. They wanted a piece of my game. And
Not my relatives.
Yeah, of course, not your relatives. They were the mean kind.
Yeah. Well, I've got some of those.
Okay, well, maybe they were. Anyway, so they came to me and they made this offer. Can't believe you've been doing this on your own with your own money and collecting and just let us help you, and it's going to be so much better. You're going to.
What did the characters look like? Did they look
They
like?
looked like they had just rolled off the set of Goodfellas. I mean, there was they weren't hiding it, and it was super obvious because the way that they had come to me is somebody wanted to introduce me to New York hedge fund guys that were interested in playing in the game. So I had them meet me at the Four Seasons bar in Midtown, and they rolled in, and I was pretty sure, what the situation was revealed pretty quickly.
They didn't look like hedge fund guys. They looked
and
like.
they didn't talk like hedge fund guys. And I tried to explain to them logical terms why that wouldn't work. And, they were sort of, it was an awkward exchange. And then I left, and they kept trying to reach me, and I just ghosted the Italian mom, I guess. It should show you how reckless and crazy I was being. And then they sent someone to my house, and I lived in this, what I thought was a very safe doorman protected building on Central Park West. And so when someone knocked at the door, I thought it was my doorman bringing some, I had good relationships with my doorman. I took care of them, financially. And I opened the door, and I'll just never forget staring into these eyes that I couldn't find an ounce of humanity in. And he, pushed his way in and put a gun in my mouth and basically told me that I work for them. And if I don't comply, and if I tell anyone, they know where my family lives in Colorado.
Wow.
And then this guy beat the crap out of me. And then he took everything from my safe, of course, the cash, and there's some gold bars or something in there, but also, photographs and things that my great grandmother, Molly Dubin, had left to me, who I'm named after. And then he left. And
was it one or two? How many people?
Just one. And he wasn't wearing a mask either, which was that was terrifying to me too, because that just, he wasn't afraid. Anyway, so there was no more denying in that moment that this was not gray anymore. This was, all the way out there.
Yep.
And I couldn't tell anyone because I was so afraid that they would do something to my family. And it was really dark. I mean, I waited for their call, and I would say for the first time in my life, I had no idea what to do. I mean, it seemed like I was just trapped. And, a couple days went by. I didn't hear from them. I wasn't leaving my apartment because it was very clear that I'd gotten assaulted, and I didn't want anyone calling the cops. And I think the fifth day I got the New York Times because I was getting the newspaper and food deliveries. And on the cover it said 125 arrested in the biggest mob-related takedown in New York City history.
Well, that was good news.
It was good news. I never heard from them again. But the crazy part is that I just kept going.
You kept going with the game?
Yeah.
So let's go back to, you mentioned briefly about the insurance scam, and you mentioned the Russian mafia, and then we switched really quick to this story. Go back to when, because you started to hear about the informant, the Russian, after the incident with the Italians, or?
Yes. So you can imagine it just feels like the walls are closing in.
So this is happening at about the same time.
And every week I'm like, but I got to collect this money that's on the street, because if I leave now, I'm going to leave $1 million on the street, or whatever it is, So I always had these ways of convincing myself that I needed, that I couldn't get out yet. And so that happened. The CI, who was this guy that I'd never understood how he could afford to play. I thought maybe the Russians were staking him because they're from the same neighborhood. They all knew each other. And then he called me one night drunk and told me all of this. And I kind of didn't believe him, but I kind of did. Because I kind of felt like I was being followed, and it all.
So what inspired him to call you? Well,
he was just a mess.
Yeah.
He thought he
was
in
he
love
trying to
with
protect
me,
you?
and he also had a bad drinking problem, and I think, he said, but I'm protecting you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, did you tell them anything? And,
So he was tipping you off that, hey, I'm an informant. But I want you to know that so that you could,
get out.
get out of it.
But, I said to myself, I was like, he's just doing this as a way to, I was just.
You weren't sure whether to believe him or not?
I wasn't sure whether to believe him. And everyone was just, I was just surrounded by people and situations that were not clear, and people who were con artists and liars. And, there were other game runners that were always trying to send people in to, cheat at my game, or, it was the jungle.
And you probably had more of a friend group when you were in LA, and then because of how recently you moved to New York, you probably didn't really.
I brought a lot of my friends with me.
Oh, you did?
I
Okay.
did. But by that time, I was pushing people away from me because I cared about these women, and I knew it was getting bad, and I knew it was getting dark. And so, I was just kind of getting more and more isolated. And then, during this time, I had also started taking a rake at some of the games, because in LA and in the beginning of New York, I had been very disciplined about who I let play in the game, both for the health of my business and also for the health of a human being. So I didn't want somebody who couldn't afford the game, who was clearly a gambling addict, to come and play in the game just so I could get a game off. And then towards the end, I started getting sloppy, and I wasn't that sort of moral compass and that integrity that had guided me, that my mom had really instilled in all of us. It just wasn't there. And sometimes I try to think about how I went from moving to LA and volunteering at Children's Hospital, and then, being in charge of this game, and caring deeply about the people and caring deeply about their families, to being able to just put somebody in the game and not care about what happens to them. And I think you start to make these little small micro decisions. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens in inches, where you make a small little seemingly benign decision that's a little outside of your moral comfortability, and then the next one is easier to make. And then it just compounds until I remember looking in the mirror in New York and just having no idea who I was. I didn't know what I stood for. I didn't know who, I didn't know what my future held. I didn't even know kind of like what my favorite color was, or these things that you are just so sure about yourself, because I'd become such a chameleon. And it was just so dark. And so I started to make more reckless decisions, in probably a bid to self-destruct a bit. And so I started letting some people play that, 50-50, they could pay if they lost. And at those games, I started taking a rake because I had more exposure, and the CI tracked that. And however the feds found out, I don't know, maybe they had a couple CIs, I'm not sure. But I remember getting this text message from one of my poker dealers. I had multiple games going on by that time. And the message said, "The FBI is here looking for you."
No.
And so finally, in that moment, I knew it was game over.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I had pushed my family so far away, and my dad used to write me handwritten letters every year telling me that this was going to end badly, and my mom used to plead for me to get out of the light, and I just took it as nothing's ever good enough for you guys. I'm an entrepreneur, I'm making all this money, but Jordan and Jeremy are still,
sibling rivalries.
It would be a while before I took an honest look at myself.
Yeah.
But all I wanted to do was go home. So I remember.
All you wanted to do was go home? You wanted
Colorado.
you wanted to get back, and
I just
a safe situation with people you loved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was scared. And So I remember, packing a bag and grabbing my dog and getting into a car and thinking that the feds were following me and were going to apprehend me at the airport. And then I tried to book a plane ticket on my way, and my credit card got declined, and then my next card got declined. And I logged into my bank account, and my bank account balance read negative $9,999,099.
Oops.
And I got home, and my attorneys called, and they said, this is the Office of Asset Forfeiture that has seized your money. And I don't know if a lot of people know this, but your personhood has the presumption of innocence, but your property doesn't.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I think in Florida is the only state that differs from that. Anyway, so, if the feds believe that you are making your money illegally, they can take it.
And fight over it later.
It's on the civil side of the government, and and basically what they said to my attorney is she can hire an attorney and sue us for it, but anything that you say in that proceeding can count as confession, and I couldn't do that. So I just went away, and I remember moving in with my mom, and I didn't have a dime. I didn't even have a bank account.
Yeah.
And most of the friends kind of were gone. Anyone that owed me money was, had disappeared. And the Fed said, look, she's not a target of our investigation at this time. We'll let you know. So it was never in my mind that they would just come overnight, like at night, crashing down the door, because my attorney had said to them, if you want to talk to her, just tell us, we'll come in. And so, I went to my mom. I moved in with my mom. I was super depressed. I was humiliated. It was a bad headspace. But, I kind of had this realization, because my mom felt so bad. My dad felt bad. My brothers felt bad. But this problem, this mess that I had created was way bigger than they knew how to solve. And I just had this realization, if I don't fix this, no one is. Like, nobody's coming to fix this. And so I knew I had to get mentally healthy. And so I started reading all these books on psychology and on, anxiety, and then started reading about people who had made tremendous comebacks. And I kept coming across meditation, which just sort of made me angry, because the idea of sitting with my own head at that time, or any time, sounded really annoying and hard. But there was so much science, and there was...
Yeah. No, I've gotten into, the book came out on breathing a few years back. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So I adopted that a couple years ago and have continued such. Yeah. So I'll just lay on a mat for 35 minutes, go through this breathing routine that's pretty, deep. I've gone as high as over 4 minutes of breath hold.
Wow.
And you have to just be there, present. You're in your mind, your body's motionless, and you're following a breathing pattern, but you're also mentally getting very situated. So it certainly has worked for me.
Yeah. And
wish I would have had that 20 years ago, 10 years ago, when I was in my high stress periods.
Yeah. Sometimes I think meditation has a PR problem, in that people just think it's something you do as emergency medicine or as a spiritual practice, but it's actually, like you said, it's training for your mind. And the type of meditation that I started doing, and that I still do, is insight meditation, where you place the focus on the breath, the mind starts chirping, and you just note it, thinking, fear, discomfort. And what starts to become really clear is that, as Michael Singer says in The Untethered Soul, you're not the voice in the head, you're the one that hears it. And so as soon as I kind of started to realize that, I started to realize that you can actively change the narrative, and that the thinking mind isn't always telling the truth, maybe isn't usually telling the truth. And that higher part of your consciousness, the one that hears it, can start to run the show. So thinking mind goes, we're done, we're finished. There's no one's ever going to do anything with you again. You're going to live at your mom's house forever. I can, as I meditate more and as I train that part of my mind, I can dismiss that thought. I can re-narrate that thought. And sometimes if that inner voice is really, relentless, I can also get a little gangster with that, with those thoughts, and like activate that anger. Like, fuck you, I'm not staying down. I'm not staying on the bench. Like, people have overcome much more, challenging circumstances than this. And so that was kind of the first step. And then, something that I had to do was I had to take responsibility for this.
Yeah. So you mentioned briefly that they came
That's not yet.
to your house. That's not yet.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I was clarifying. Did we go past that, or
No.
that hasn't happened yet? So you're now trying to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You said Colorado. Was that in Boulder at the time?
It was
or
in the mountains.
Up in the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to get yourself situated again,
Yep.
mentally healthy, physically healthy.
I'm working on my
trying
mind.
to figure out what you're going to do with your life, how
Yep.
you're going to bounce back.
That's right.
And being told by your lawyer that they're not.
If they want you,
target,
they'll call me.
Yep.
And making amends to the people I needed to make amends to, taking responsibility for this thing, and just saying, this is what I'm talking about, like going into those shadows and understanding, like, this is all my fault. Mm-hmm. I made these decisions. And then the second part to that, which is for so many people even harder, learning to forgive yourself for it. Mm-hmm. Because I just knew that there wasn't going to be a comeback if I was lugging around this self-hatred, self-pity. And so, I kind of made this deal that I'm going to take responsibility for this. I'm going to do whatever I can to fix whatever I can. And I'm going to give myself some grace. And that wasn't a decision I made that just fixed everything. That was a decision I made. And then I had to remake it every single day and work on my mind in that way. And, I kind of had this incredible 2 years of, I think I'd always cared so much about what other people think. My family, for sure, but also, the peanut gallery. Yeah. And I lived in this very confined and sometimes uncomfortable mental prison of I have to look good and sound good, and then I just failed spectacularly in front of the world.
And people like failures more than they like success stories.
Yeah. So. And like, people would whisper when I went to LA. I mean, it was, and it came out in the tabloids because there were celebrities involved. So it wasn't like this thing that people didn't know about. And I'm in the mountains. I'm in beautiful nature. I'm getting so, clear on my fault here, and then kind of befriending myself at the same time. And everything is now like moving to the inside, and it was this kind of magical, liberating time where I realized that you don't need to outsource your value or whether or not to like yourself from the external. Like, it has to be foundationally interior. And so it was a return to that sense of morality. It was a return to, I'm going to like be fierce about this, and there's nothing and no one that's going to stop me. And I don't care what the odds are, and I don't need to talk to anyone about this. I'm going to figure this out. Mm-hmm. And so finally, it was very hard. My network, as you would imagine, was completely destabilized. And I didn't reach out to them out of respect. And most of them didn't contact me, and I get that.
Yep.
And
were there a couple bright spots in that? People who were there for you during this difficult period?
Yeah, for sure. And then, it was also this revealing of these are your people,
Yeah.
because you wonder, right?
Yeah, no, as you're telling your story, I'm thinking back to my story, and especially there were times, one in particular when I was leaving level 3, and you're like, who are your friends and who aren't your friends? You know, who's gonna reach out? Who's gonna help out? And who's gonna be like, well, you're kind of out of favor now. We're just moving on, and you start to really learn
Did
kind of
did
who
people
cares about you.
stick by you?
Yes, some did, but some
Was it most that
some.
didn't?
My situation wasn't,
Yeah.
like your situation, so I don't want to, overinflate kind of what I went through. But you did learn a lot about, what was authentic, what wasn't. They all were at the end of the day, because then, they come back when you're having a different round of success. But the ones who didn't wait for that were the ones that you remember the most.
For sure. So I finally got a job at this little production company in LA, and I moved back into this studio apartment in West Hollywood. And, I felt really good inside. I just felt really whole and aligned again. And I'd lost a big part of that. And, I just remember sitting on the little balcony and watching the sunset. And I'm like, okay, it's a fresh start. And I think I was like turning 33 in a couple days. And then about 5 days later, I hear the sound in the hall, and I get arrested in the middle of the night by 17 FBI agents with machine guns and high beam flashlights. They're all stacked at the end of this hallway. And they're like, put your hands up. You can't even see anything. The lights are blinding you. You hear all this like guns and everything. And they're like, walk towards us. Right. You're like, okay.
Well, as you, in that moment, obviously your mind's racing all over the place, but as you reflect on that, why did they choose to do that? To intimidate you, or what was was the rationale?
I think that they have a whole sort of playbook that they execute to weaken you so much that you make a plea deal, become a CI, do whatever it is that they want you to do. So it was this overly aggressive, scary situation. They put me in handcuffs. They put me in shackles. They put this piece of paper in front of me that said, "The United States of America versus Molly Bloom," and they just take me to prison. And no one's giving me any answers. And I don't know when I'm getting out. No one will tell me that. And I just remember sitting in that cell, and I was like, okay, I have to do something to maintain sanity here. And so there were like cement blocks, and I was like, okay, let me figure out, let's do some math here. Like, let me figure out how many cement blocks in the whole thing, just anything to keep your mind occupied so you're not spiraling out.
Were you by yourself in the cell, or
I was
were
by
you surrounded by
myself.
other people?
Mm-hmm. And, my mom had to fly in and put up her house to bail me out. And then she and my best friend picked me up. And, that was when I saw the press release, and it said I was looking at 60 years in prison.
Oh.
And it was some crazy, indictment that somehow connected different organized crime groups. It was like the people running poker games, and then it was the bookmakers, and then it was like the Russian organized crime, and I'm like, I didn't know 70% of the people in this indictment. And the person at the top of the indictment was this guy who's known as the Vor. That's like the godfather of, like in Italian organized crime. And he's in Moscow, and, he's like one of the most wanted men in the world. And I'm just like, I need to know the logic here. Like, where's the connection? But it was terrifying. And
it wasn't like you had a bunch of money to go hire attorneys.
I had no money.
Right.
And my mom had just put her, and so we go to New York, and I had 8 meetings that day, and 7 out of the 8 attorneys said this is going to be between $250 and $500 just to, read the indictment and start to advise you. Like, we need that much in a retainer. And I kept saying, I don't have any money, but I promise I'll figure it out, you know? And finally, the last person we met with was Jim Walden. And he was a prosecutor in the Eastern District in Brooklyn. And he went after the 5 crime families and, corruption and fraud. And he's reading this indictment and he's like, you're telling me that you're in this indictment because you ran a game of Texas Hold'em, paid your taxes, and maybe took a rake for 6 months? He's like, did you charge anybody interest? He's going through this whole thing. And I said, yeah, I'm telling you that's what happened. That's the deal. And he looks at my mom and he looks at me and he's like, okay, I'm going to help you. And we go to the arraignment and it was, my mom, like to this day, still talks about it because it was like all these like gnarly, Russian gangsters, couple of the people from the poker world, all men, and then like me sitting in the middle. And on the left side, it was like all the Russian girlfriends that were like, so glamorous and whatever. And my like mom, my little mom. And it was just like this, like from the time that they, were in my hall, like I was like, this can't be real life. And, I hadn't run a game in 2 years. And then, I started working with Jim, and he is someone who's truly honorable and truly has so much integrity. And I remember him saying, like, I'm like, all right, Walden, what's our strategy and what's our angle? Like, I can't fight this, because he thought I had a good fight,
Yeah.
I said, I can't fight this. And he said, okay, well then integrity is going to be our strategy and our angle. And I say this a lot, that it just felt like someone knocked the air out of me, because that is who I wanted to be. I wanted to be Jim Walden. I wanted to have that kind of impact and, contribute to the world in a good way. And here I was under very public federal indictment. And I just remember making a promise to myself in his office, and he's at Gibson Dunn, and it's like these beautiful offices, and I'm like, I can't afford this. But he convinced the partners to take it on an IOU. And I just remember in that moment saying to myself, I will never, ever abandon myself, my family, or what I believe in for anything ever again. Because I also saw the lie of it. I saw the lie of having money and celebrity and, makes you happy. I think if you have a good foundation, if you're a person that can also give as much as you take, and like you've held on to that part of your humanity where you don't think having so much money gives you a license to not be a fair person. I think there are people who with the right foundation that can have an incredible life with money and power, but I think for the most part, it is not the recipe.
Yeah.
And I saw it in myself and I saw it in them. And so I just knew I said to myself, I'll never trade my integrity for anything ever again. And a couple weeks later, we met with the prosecutors, and they wanted me to become a confidential informant. And then it all started to make sense. They're like, we're not interested in the Russians or the Italians. We want to know about the celebrities, the politicians, and the billionaires, and the people of Wall Street. And if you're willing to do this, we'll give you all your money back, and we'll give you a deferred prosecution, which will keep you out of prison. And the flip side of that was they could give me not 60 years, but they could give me up to 10 because of the amount of money I made. And they made that clear that they were going to recommend prison time. And so I went home, and I think I had like 24 or 48 hours to make the decision. They don't give you a long time. And Jim really wanted me to take the deal because he did not want me to go to prison. And I'm like, why? I'll learn a new language. And he's like, it's not like that. Yeah. Women's federal prison is not a country club. It's people who have done violence offenders, and the guards are known to take advantage of women. He's like, it's not a place you want to spend 1 second in, Molly. But I went home and I sort of thought about it, and I didn't believe that this particular prosecutor was going after real crime. Like if there was an Epstein in my game, you wouldn't have had to take my money. I would have marched into your office and told you everything you needed to know, Mm-hmm. But this was like, who's running their own book? And, gambling's book, like sports betting is becoming legal next year in New York. And just so all these things that, look, maybe they should be illegal, but it's not like you're out there, going after the people that I think.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, this is whether gambling should be a crime or not. It's certainly not on the same level of.
It's not murder. It's not child trafficking. It's
exactly.
Right. So it's not stealing money from people.
And it's not even illegal in many areas.
Right, and
it's promoted. It's socially acceptable. It's fun. Maybe games got a control of the type you're saying, but people have fun when they get around the table and they play cards and they bet, and it's to want to throw someone in prison for a long period of time for that just doesn't seem appropriate.
Yeah, and I have a Charles Schwab account on my phone, and I can go drain my bank account and gamble on any business in America.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I could not justify dragging these people who had kids, who had families, who had been loyal to me during my tenure, through this just to get out of the consequences of my own decisions. It didn't check out in terms of the sort of promise I'd made to myself and like the deep desire I had to return to a life of being able to feel good about myself when I put my head on the pillow. Because having a delusional sense of confidence in myself and belief in myself is one of the main reasons that I've been able to do anything.
But it's an extremely hard choice, though. I mean, if you're staring down going to prison for multiple years and the consequences of being in prison, or telling people what they want to hear, which is truthful, and I don't, we all would like to think we would have made the noble decision there, but most people wouldn't. Most people would protect themselves.
Yeah. I mean, it depends. I think you don't know what you'll do until you're in that situation. And there was also a part of me that was like, and this is just a consistent part of me that has made life a little bit more difficult, like, F you. Yeah. Don't come to my house with 17 FBI agents. Don't take all my money. Don't, lie to my attorneys while you're building a case and then put me through all of this just so you can get some flashy New York Post cover of an indictment. Like, I'm not going to be part of that game. And so I turned the offer down and I waited to be sentenced. And it was a year and it was hard. And my dad and I weren't speaking. And
because he wanted you to,
No, because he had written me handwritten letters every year. And then when I got arrested by the FBI, I called him and he said, get a public defender. I told you,
Wow.
And so he was upset with me. And then I was mad at him because I'm like, I need a dad right now,
Yeah.
And our relationship had been tough. Like, our relationship had been fraught, had been really high highs and really low lows, but I never felt like he respected me or loved me as much as my brothers. And that was a consistent ache in my life and a consistent driver into these, of my ambition and, the places that I was willing to go. I'm not putting that on him. I'm just saying that sort of,
it's, right, wrong, or indifferent. It's what was a motivating factor of the decisions you made. I mean, a lot of people are, driven in ways that, if they were being honest, they would say stuff like that. And
And so my dad called me a couple weeks before sentence, maybe a month or two before sentencing, and he said, you are my firstborn child and my only daughter, and we're gonna hash this out, because everyone thought I was going to prison.
Yep. And
so it didn't happen in Central Park on the ice skating rink. I didn't trade Chanel gloves for ice skates.
Which we're going to get into the movie and the book and the movie in a little bit.
Yeah. But he did come out and I asked him the question that I was always so afraid to ask him, which was, why don't you love me as much as you love my brothers? And I was so afraid of that answer. I was afraid he would either answer me with a lie and I would be able to tell, or he would tell me the truth and it would break my heart completely. And his response was so different than what I had thought in my head. And he got very emotional. And he said, I love you every bit as much as your brothers. There have been times where I haven't liked you as much, which was fair. But he said, I think the world's a really hard place, and I think it's harder for girls and women. I wanted to make you tough, and I think I took it too far.
Yep.
And so, from that moment, that was the sort of, rock bottom that my dad and I built this incredible relationship we have now.
But let's go back to what you just said. The world's a really tough place. So let's pause on that one there, because there's more. I mean, it sounds, someone could hear that and it sound a little dramatic, but there's a truth to that, and a truth to that when you're a parent looking at your kids at various ages, like how are they going to be prepared for the world,
Right.
and what the world can do to you, because you want your kids to reach out, to find themselves, to have an ambition, to take risks, yet you also know you get your head chopped off, you know, and it's easy to think of that through just maybe rosy colored glasses, but there's the truth of the matter is the world is a scary place, and it can be a dangerous place, and people can get in trouble, and how to prepare your kids for that or other loved ones. There's no book you can read and know that. And then it sounds like on top of that, he said, and he thinks it's even harder if you're a woman, which I think that's true. I guess I don't know that I would use those words on my own, but as I hear you say it and I think about the situation, there's certainly truth in that.
There are different challenges, I think, across the board, and I don't know how to quantify it, but that was his read, and I think it also had to do with things he saw in my personality.
Yeah, well, because people who put themselves out there more are more vulnerable, and you were certainly putting yourself out there more, and and that makes you more exposed.
Right. So anyway, my dad and I, it was this very healing moment, and since then, we've built and grown this incredible relationship, and I feel like I lost a lot of time by speculating and by coloring in, because when the brain doesn't have the full story, it's going to color in. And so I talk about that a lot because I was a huge risk taker in business and sports and in life, but in relationships, I played it real safe because I was terrified of rejection. And, it's not lost on me that my outcome's not always the outcome, but I think it's always worth, getting the answer and trying, because if this never happened, maybe I just went my whole life resenting him,
Oh, it's good to hear you guys found, your relationship.
It's great. Yeah. So, so I get sentenced, and the judge is like massively disappointed with my life choices. But he said, I'm inspired by Jim Walden standing up for you, standing here for you today, the people that showed up for you, the letters I've gotten from former professors and ski coaches. And, I'm going to fine you a lot of money, but I'm not going to put you in prison.
Whew.
Yeah.
When you heard those words.
I lost my knees.
Oh, I can't imagine.
But then, a couple hours later, I'm at dinner with my family, and Jordan's finishing his fifth program at Harvard, and while doing his residency and raising 2 kids, and Jeremy's being inducted in the Colorado Sports Hall of Fame, and I'm sitting there like, God, I'm the family felon, and I was like, I gotta have a comeback, but it was bleak. I was almost 35 millions and millions of dollars in debt, a convicted felon, kind of a social pariah, network decimated, and the tabloids are telling this incredibly reductive tale. You don't have to like what I did, But I built something from scratch that I was the marketing, like I was the marketer, I was the bank, I was the customer relations, I was the, I was
Salesperson.
CFO, I was the CEO, and it was with some of the world's most difficult people, and there was no recourse. It was and I knew that I had skills, and I needed the world to know that so that I could have a second chance. And so, I decided I would write a book. And I went to all the big publishing houses, and they were very excited for the meeting, and they wanted this big celebrity takedown piece. And I said, no, there's this better story about this young girl from Loveland. And, all of them passed, and my lit agent and I were just relentless. And finally I got this small book deal, and I published my book, and I waited for my life to change.
And was the book title?
Molly's Game.
Molly's Game as well. Yep. So you published the book, and you're proud of the book.
And I had press and whatever. And I'm like, okay, my life is going to change, because I thought the book would sell. And then I think it sold like 10 copies, and most of them were from my family.
I'm sure it sold more than that.
Yeah, well, I didn't out-earn my small advance. Let's just put it that way. And instead of giving up, I just doubled down. I was like, the story is going to save me. I just feel it in my gut. And it's the way to change the narrative. And now I just have to get real serious. And so I had a million meetings in Hollywood. And what would happen was people were extremely interested in the room, and then it would be crickets. And so finally I asked somebody, what's the deal here? And he was the head of a big network. And he said, I'm going to be honest with you. We're all getting a lot of phone calls from some pretty important people in Hollywood, in DC, and on Wall Street that are saying, don't make the Molly Bloom project.
Wow.
And so what I had found from all these meetings is that the filmmakers, the top filmmakers, I think are the most powerful people in Hollywood. They're the rarest species. They are the ones that can tell a story. I'm talking about Spielberg. I'm talking about Sorkin. I'm talking about Catherine Bigelow, Shonda Rhimes, these people who don't have to play politics. And so I made that short list, and on the top of the list for me was Sorkin. He is my favorite writer. I knew he would get the deeper story, and he was also the highest paid screenwriter at the time. So I started relentlessly trying to get a meeting with him. And he had just won an Oscar for The Social Network, so it was very difficult. Mm-hmm. And he's kind of he doesn't do like social media, and you can't like wiggle your way in. And so I just had to be relentless. And finally, Ken Hertz, my entertainment, who later became my entertainment attorney and one of my closest friends, sent him the book. And I got the opportunity to fly to LA to meet with Aaron. And right before I walked into the Soho House, I was like, what am I thinking? I am 35 years old, millions of dollars in debt, a convicted felon, like a social pariah. My book sold 10 freaking copies. Like, why am I like, whoa, am I crazy? And then I was like, girl, pick your chin up and go in there and sell that story. Right.
Tell your story.
And so I went in and I told my story, and he just sat there kind of like very stoically, poker face. I could not read anything. And when I was done, he kind of like gave me this amused expression, and he said, I'll tell you one thing, kid. I've never met someone so down on their luck and so full of themselves. I said, does that mean you're in, Sorkin? And, a couple weeks later he was. And so.
And when he said he was, or when it became what he was, what was it that really caught his imagination?
It was the fact that I stood up for the consequences of my action, that I didn't sell people out in my book or to the prosecutors, that I stood my ground, and that I didn't, sell my debts to get money, that when the world was darkest, I still I clung to integrity, which is why integrity is the long game, and everyone should do it. And the movie came out, and Costner played my dad, which shot me right to the top of favorite kid status. And in all reality, it was was a beautiful movie that gave me a second chance.
And so when the movie was turning from a book to a screenplay and a screenplay to the screen, how were you involved at that point?
So it was really funny. When Sorkin called me to tell me that he was going to do it, he said, I have good news and bad news. The good news is I want to adapt your book, and I want to do it now. I want to walk away from the movie that I'm in. And the bad news is you're going to have zero creative control. I thought about it for a while, and I was like, called him back, and I was like, but I'm your only source material. So I got to spend 8 months with Aaron, in his office with his assistant, crafting this story. And so unlike most Hollywood movies where the writer does some interviews and reads some Walter Isaacson books or, and then goes off to write the story in the way that they feel the story is best sort of adapted for screen. When I sat down to watch that movie, it was 2.5 hours of my life flashing before my eyes. Now everyone sounded smarter and funnier than they are in real life, and everyone's better looking. But it was so true and consistent with the real events.
Yep. Well, I can't not ask you this question. So tell us about Jessica Chastain, who played you in the movie. So how much did you get to interact with her? What did you think it was a good choice? She obviously, I'll say the movie was very well regarded by everyone I know who's seen the movie. Way before I met you, I saw the movie, loved the movie, and Jessica was a big part of that. I mean, she brought the character of who was you in real life. I mean, she brought us all into this story in such a big way.
Jessica's brilliant. I spent a little time with her. And in the time I spent with her, what I saw very clearly is Jessica is fearless. She's extremely down to earth. She's not afraid to use her voice. And she is massively talented. And when I heard, as soon as Aaron signed on, it was fun because he would share with me, like, all these A-list actresses are, calling him, emailing him, because Aaron had never written a female lead before. And so it was all very exciting. But I had really fallen in love with Jessica in Zero Dark 30 and Interstellar. And
Zero Dark 30, she was a rock star in that.
Sublime.
Yeah.
And I think she does vulnerability and strength so well.
Yeah, with them being the same character at the same time. Yeah.
Right. And so I was like, these are all great, but can it be Jessica? And I really respected what Aaron said, sort of kiddingly, sort of not, which is you're not going to have creative control. I had to, at that point, step away and let this be Aaron's work of art.
Sure, of course. Yeah.
And
which makes sense. I mean, the fact that you were there able to, express opinion, provide more color,
right,
be close to it, influence the outcome. But then if you get someone like that to run with the ball, I mean,
yeah,
you've got to respect what they want to do with it and
absolutely
hope you'll like the outcome.
Absolutely. And the movies I know where the biopics where the real person is too heavy-handed, I think there's a negative outcome because we're too close to it. We're too close to our own stories. There are a couple things that I really like volleyed for, and some I got and some I didn't. Yep. And that was okay.
Yeah. As in fact, you even gave me a quote for it. I wrote the book Bandwidth, which is a big story that has a lot of big personalities in it.
Sure.
Who did crazy things, some for the good, some for the bad. But I'm in this story too. And I'm in the story as kind of a storyteller, but also, a character throughout that has big ups and big downs. And, there's a story in there. And, a lot of people, like, sooner or later, someone's going to want to pick that up. And, there's a lot of stories you could tell within that. But even the thought of someone taking that And my story being part of it is like, I'd be kind of scared. I'd be scared about
course.
what are they going to bring out in that,
course.
because there's you could paint the picture fairly, in a fair way, but also a fair way that you would cringe at part of
100%.
who you were and what you did at different points in time.
It's an enormous risk. And I remember in the beginning, Aaron was working with this producer who was like his producer, and this guy's super brilliant, but also not a nice person. And on the call, I knew he wasn't interested in this movie. And he also lowballed me in the front end. So if you ever do a deal, make sure you get big front end in Hollywood, because the back end is a joke. And it's a net number, and everyone knows that you're probably not going to see anything. So for me, I was like, Aaron, this doesn't work. I need someone who's passionately engaged, and I need someone who's willing to invest, who's willing to write a check that makes my life, that moves the needle. This is not a vanity project. I don't want to do this. I wanted to crawl under the covers and disappear from public life forever. But it just so happened this was my only idea, you know? And so, I had to pass on that producer, and it was 3 nerve-wracking days of everyone telling me, you're going to lose Aaron because this is his guy. And in the end, he decided to, not go with him. And we brought in another producer, Mark Gordon, who's a wonderful human being and who gave me a beautiful, upfront licensing, book rights, life rights, fee, and that was a non-negotiable for me.
Yep. So the first time that you saw the finished product was it in a private setting, or was it?
They told me, they said, Molly, you need to see this movie by yourself or with your family. And I said, no way.
Really?
I'm not going to survive that. I'm going to see it when the rest of the world sees it. And if it's good, great. If it's bad, I'll deal with the fallout then. I'm not going to have this information before it comes out, because it's coming out.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting in the theater in Toronto, and there's 2,000 people there.
What theater?
In Toronto. It was at the Toronto Film Fest. And there was 2,000 people in the theater, and my mom and my whole family. And I'm like, what was I thinking? Why didn't I see this movie? And
did people know you were there?
Mm-hmm. So they're all looking back at me, and thank God he opened with that with the sports scene, and it was so jarred you out of your chair, because I was like, okay, if that movie had opened slowly, I would have died. And even though I was in that, I just kept saying, no matter what, Molly, your only response is gratitude. If it's good, if it's bad, because Aaron had fought for this movie, and he fought for the way that he wanted to tell it. I mean, I remember being in so many rooms where, the studio heads were like, we can't sell this movie without her having a love affair. Can she fall in love with her lawyer? And I'm like, why can't we sell a movie about a woman that wants to be ambitious, or that makes him, listen, I had relationships. That's a different genre.
Yeah.
That's a different movie. And one that probably nobody wants to see. But, I saw Aaron stand up and fight for that. And also people saying, I don't know how to market this. I don't know. I don't get it. And him just saying, just trust me. And because it was him, they did. And so,
When did you realize as you were watching it that this is a good movie? Was it clear halfway through?
I don't know if I did. I was in shock, but my dad looked at me and said, this is going to change your life. He made you into a movie heroine.
Yep.
So I don't think that you can process at that moment. It's your life, especially when it's so close to your life. And
you're in a fishbowl. I mean, you were surrounded by people who are...
And, Aaron spent 8 months with me. So the words that are coming out of Jessica's mouth, like, are my word, like it's me, like, and she's speaking with the same cadence. And it was a very, it was a very strange experience, but it sure did
When the
change
movie
my
was
life.
over, and you're sitting there and you're getting up, what do you remember people said to you at that
I don't
moment?
remember. I just remember I was like, I have to go. I have to go back to my hotel room. Like, I was just so overwhelmed. I went to the party for like 5 minutes. I said my thank yous, and then I just went back to my hotel room and just had to just like.
And what year are we at now?
2018.
2018, so 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, you were living where when the movie came out? So you weren't back here in Boulder at that point.
I was back in Colorado.
Oh, you were back in Colorado.
I was in Denver.
Okay, so your life must have felt totally different after that movie came out.
It
Tell
did in
us.
some ways, and didn't in others, because I
Well,
made
you
this.
had to feel vindicated.
No, for sure.
You had to feel like respected again. You had to feel like now my story,
100%.
the true story is out there, and I don't have to be like wondering what people are conjuring up or what they know
Right.
or what they don't know. Most people now know your story, so
Yeah.
that's got to be huge.
Yeah, no, it was, and I still pinch myself that this crazy plan actually worked, and there's just, I still talk to Aaron 5 times a week, and I just.
Well, send Aaron bandwidth and tell him find a story in there.
Okay.
Because there's lots of crazy stories in there that that you could take bits and pieces and do something creative with.
For sure.
But I want to know what the rest of your life is all about now. What would you share with the people listening about who Molly Bloom is in 2025 and where you're going and what's most important to you? Like, I wanted to spend another 20 minutes on this phase of your life, but let's get through the abbreviated version for now.
When all that when the movie came out, I started getting offers to speak, and I got a lot of offers in the gambling world, but I turned those down. Because I really wanted to go in a different direction, and they'll always be there for me if I want them to. But speaking has become a really meaningful, purposeful thing to do. I've really worked on extrapolating the sort of universal life lessons from my story, using the story as a vehicle, but really talking about risk and mindset and psychology, understanding your own psychology and other people's. I'm writing a book on effective presence, effective with an A. It's kind of the newer version of EQ, and it's the science of how you make people feel emotionally.
EQ, emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It's truly the science of how you make people feel. And whereas, the kind of historic thought was you try to read people's facial expressions and their body language, which scientists have now found has about a 60% error rate, which I could have told you, because anytime someone walked in to the poker game and said, I can read anyone at this table, I knew they were going to be writing me a check.
Because if they could, they wouldn't tell you that.
Well, but also like, it's really hard to read people.
Yeah.
Now, when you spend more time with them, it becomes easier. But anyway, effective presence is really this deep dive into how to leave this positive emotional, positive emotional impact with people, because that is what moves us as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people walk in to a pitch or a podcast or whatever, and they're like, they're thinking like, did I wear the right clothes? Do I have the right things to say? When what we should really be thinking is, how can we sit with this person and make them feel seen, heard, remembered? How can we make them feel safe? These are all the conditions in which human beings become open for connection. And that is the most powerful thing in the world, like attachment, connection. I mean, and it's a dying and lost art. There's this, in the Guinness Book of World Records, the most successful salesperson is a car salesman. And they're like, what's your strategy? And he says, I tell people, I really like you. And then I send them cards every holiday saying, you know what, Dan, I really like you. And, you know, it's like,
boy, that would have meant something before you just told me that story.
but I think the kicker is it has to come from an authentic place.
Yeah.
Otherwise it feels slimy
you
and
can see through. So effective
with an A, presence. I'm also writing a book on like basically women in risk. So kind of a handbook. I just started on this one, but just a handbook for women on risk, because I think women and men like have different experiences with risk. And I think that there's a very there's more specific nuances to teach women risk. And I don't think there's a book out there like that. So I'm dying to start something big, dying to start a company. But, I have a 3-year-old, and my job right now, my main job, my most important job is to be her mom. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to wait until she's in school to get involved in what I think is an incredibly exciting, opportune time.
Great. Well, you have, incredible stories to share that can shape people's lives. I feel honored that, this is one form in which you're telling the story. Would love to get you in speaking sessions, with some of the events we throw in and around Boulder, and we'll look for opportunities to do that. But it's been great getting to know you. You too. Can't wait to do part 3, which is going to be about your books.
No, it's going to be about your book and your movie.
No. Part 3 is still going to be about you. You're
I think we're getting sick of me.
No, we'll bring those books to life, and glad you're here in Boulder. You're part of what makes Boulder a special place.
Yeah, Dan, you were one of the first people to welcome me, and it's been amazing. And if I do know anyone or ever do anything socially, it's because of you.
All right. Good deal.
So, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Bear Roars. If you enjoyed the episode, please like and subscribe on your listening platform. This podcast was produced by Loud Bear Productions and edited by Kendall Weinberg with support from Gibson Siegert.